You're at an office happy hour when the guy from the other department, the one who's always dropping hints about his investments, finally gets pressed on what he's actually worth. He throws out a figure and you can feel the whole group shift toward him. People lean in closer. Their laughter gets a notch louder at whatever he says next. Nobody turns and asks you the same thing. You still run the numbers in your head anyway, quietly, and you land somewhere that wouldn't get you that same kind of attention. You're not worth less than the people standing around that table. You just haven't figured out yet which number is the one deciding who gets that lean-in treatment. Average net worth versus the median. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead the way they always do in that store. You pick up a handbasket instead of pushing a cart. A basket means you're watching your spending. A cart means you've stopped trying for the week. Eggs go in first. The generic store brand, not the pasture-raised carton sitting $2 and change higher, for reasons you've never quite understood but somehow still respect. That's the moment someone calls out your name. Danielle Ostrander. The two of you went through Whetstone High together but drifted apart around when she relocated to Dublin for a position at Fifth Third Bank. She's dressed for the gym, pushing a cart with kombucha bottles and a pack of salmon, carrying herself with the kind of relaxed confidence of someone who isn't doing the anxious mental math you were just running out in the parking lot. I swear I just walked out of a training session on this exact thing, she says, laughing while she holds her phone up like it's some kind of punchline. Did you know the average American household sits at over $1 million in net worth? You laugh along too because that's the script you follow, but something inside your stomach drops just a little. $1 million. You think about your checking account balance. $436. You think about rent due in 6 days. The way you always circle back to it, poking at it like a bruise just to see if it's still tender. That can't be true, you say, meaning it as a joke, except it isn't really one. Danielle shrugs it off and drops a lime into her cart. That's basically what the Federal Reserve reports, she says. Average lands around 1.06 million. You nod along like you already knew that number. You didn't. You spend the rest of the aisle quiet, doing math you'd rather not be doing standing in a grocery store next to the cereal boxes, under lighting that makes everyone look a bit off. Here's what nobody bothers explaining to you in that moment. Standing there holding a basket of eggs with a number stuck in your head like a sentence being handed down. 1.06 million isn't what a typical household actually has. It's an average, and averages get pulled way up by the households sitting at the very top, the ones worth tens or even hundreds of millions. Similarly to how one kid's perfect score can drag an entire class average upward, even though nobody else came close. The figure that actually reflects where most people land, the median, the one sitting right in the center with half above it and half below, comes out to $192,700. You don't know that number yet, not with any context attached to it. All you're left with is the feeling, that sensation of being handed a measuring stick, told that this is the average height, and realizing you fall far short of it, with nobody mentioning that the stick was measured against a room, stacked with a few professional athletes. You pay for your eggs. The card gets declined once, quietly, the way it does when you're carrying exactly $436, and the register rounds up for some reason you've never fully figured out. You try the card again. It clears. Danielle either didn't catch it or was gracious enough to pretend she hadn't. Sitting in your car before you even turn the key, you open your banking app one more time, not to check your balance since you already know it by heart, but to search for something else entirely. You type in average American net worth, and then, a beat later, almost like an afterthought, median American net worth. The two figures land side by side on your screen. 1.06 million. 192,700, a gap wide enough to fit a semi-truck through. You sit with that for a moment, not quite shame. Something closer to relief, the strange kind. The kind that shows up once you realize the bar you'd been measuring yourself against was never real to begin with. The actual bar sits much closer, which means it's a whole lot more within reach. You start the engine. 6 days until rent is due. But for the first time in a long stretch, the pressure in your chest feels less like a guilty verdict and more like a starting line. Crossing over the first $100,000 mark. 3 years slip by, measured out in the miles on a Honda Civic's odometer. You bought it used, a 2019 LX, 61,000 miles on it, cloth interior, no sunroof. Because leasing never leaves you owning a single thing. And owning something, even a used Civic, felt like your first real money decision instead of just another reaction to circumstances. Your coworker, Eddie Vance, doesn't quite get it. He sits 2 desks over, drives a leased Tahoe, and grabs lunch out most days. Chipotle, or sometimes the sushi spot near the office. You bring leftovers packed in a Tupperware container that used to hold cottage cheese. He calls it the grind, half joking, the way people joke about things that make them slightly uncomfortable watching happen. You've heard the old saying, the one that circulates through finance forums, credited to some billionaire investor. The first 100 grand is the hard part. Walk if you have to. Clip every coupon you can find, because once you're past that mark, the money starts carrying its own weight. You used to roll your eyes whenever you heard it. Now you're the one living it. Here's the part nobody explains about crossing that first 100,000. It was never really about the 100,000 itself. It's about what comes next. Money growing at a steady 7% annually doubles roughly every decade. That's simply how the math works, whether you're doubling $5,000 or $5 million. What changes is what that doubling actually buys you. 7% on $5,000 nets you $350, enough for a nice dinner out. 7% on 100,000 nets you $7,000, real money showing up on its own without you lifting a finger. Before hitting that first 100,000, you're doing all the heavy lifting yourself. After it, the money starts pulling some of that weight alongside you. You don't actually feel the shift happening in real time. No bell rings anywhere. You find out on an ordinary Tuesday in the break room, refilling your water bottle, when your phone buzzes with an auto-invest confirmation from your Roth IRA. You open the app more out of habit than curiosity. $100,412. You stand there for a second, whisper it under your breath just to hear how it sounds. $100,000. A coworker walks by and asks if you're all right. You tell him you're fine. Honestly, you're better than fine. You just can't quite explain why your chest feels different than it did back in that grocery store parking lot 3 years earlier. The world catches on before you fully do. A letter shows up from your bank. Not junk mail, an actual letter letting you know the monthly maintenance fee on your checking account has been waived. No action needed on your end. You never called anyone about it, never asked. It simply stopped. A few weeks later, you're sitting in a Toyota dealership across from a finance manager named Holly Braddock, looking at trading in the Civic for a Camry SE before it hits 100,000 miles. She pulls up your numbers, glances at her screen, and mentions the rate came back at 5% instead of the 7% she'd quoted over the phone earlier. "You've got solid numbers backing you up," she says without looking up. You don't bother asking what she means by that. You already know. None of it feels dramatic. Nobody's throwing a parade for you. It's a waived fee here, a better rate there, a letter you nearly tossed without opening. But underneath all of it, something has quietly shifted, the way a tide turns long before anyone notices the waterline has moved. You drive the new Camry off the lot that same afternoon, windows rolled down, catching nothing but green lights down Route 62. For the first time, you're not calculating what you can barely afford. You're wondering, just slightly, what might actually be possible now that the door has cracked open a bit wider than it used to. You don't realize it yet, but that small crack is about to open into something much bigger. What actually changes once you hit $1 million? You're at a wedding in Cincinnati when it truly sinks in. Your old college roommate, Whitney Argyle, is getting married at a venue overlooking the river, and you're standing near the bar when you spot the bag hanging off her arm. A Chanel Classic Flab, medium size, black caviar leather, gold hardware. You know exactly what that costs now, $10,800. You know because you looked it up once out of pure curiosity, back when a figure like that used to feel like foreign currency. Now it just registers as information. You're not jealous exactly. You're running the numbers again, the same kind of math you've always done, just with different figures plugged in this time. Your portfolio crossed the $1 million mark 4 months back, on a random Tuesday, sitting in an Uber headed to the airport when you weren't even paying attention. No fireworks, just a number appearing on a screen that used to seem impossible, sitting there like it had belonged all along. Here's what $1 million actually gets you, and it's not what you pictured back at 22. A millionaire in 1990 held buying power closer to $2.4 million in today's terms. Back then, that number represented genuine excess. Now it means something far quieter. Applying the standard 4% withdrawal rule, a $1 million portfolio can reliably generate roughly $40,000 a year without ever touching the principal. That's not private jets. That's not a life free from ever worrying about money again. That's the peace of mind knowing a blown transmission or a rough month financially won't sink you. It's stability disguised as wealth. What genuinely changes is how the system starts treating you. A woman named Carla Whitfield calls you, not from a call center, but from a direct line. Her name and extension included in the voicemail. She introduces herself as your relationship manager. You never applied for anything like this. You simply crossed some threshold nobody ever told you existed, and waiting on the other side was a person whose entire job is making sure you're never stuck on hold again. The real shift happens weeks later when you need cash for a down payment, and your gut instinct to sell off some shares turns out to be the wrong move. Carla walks you through it patiently over the phone, like she's explained it 100 times before because she has. Selling triggers capital gains tax and permanently pulls that money out of the market right when it should be compounding. Instead, she sets you up with a line of credit backed by your portfolio you borrow against assets you already hold at a rate lower than what the market's likely to return, while every dollar you own stays invested and working for you. You get your cash. Your portfolio never even registers you took it. It feels like watching a magic trick the first time it clicks for you, spending money that technically never left the table. You think about Whitney's bag again on the drive home from the bank, and it doesn't sting the way it used to. It's just a bag now. You could buy it tomorrow if you wanted to, and the fact that you're not even sure you want it feels like the more interesting realization that wanting itself changes shape once money stops being the obstacle in the way. Carla mentions something almost in passing before you hang up, a further out threshold, one that unlocks doors even she can't open for you. 5 million, she says. Different rules apply once you're up there. You brush it off in the moment, laughing the same way you laughed off the million mark a few years back. You hang up, but the number stays lodged in your head anyway, refusing to fade. Crossing 5 million and hitting qualified purchaser status. You pass 5 million on an ordinary Thursday and find out through an email rather than an app, a quarterly statement from your financial advisor. The subject line is so plain it nearly hides what's actually inside it. You read the figure twice, then a third time, standing in your kitchen while your coffee goes cold because certain numbers demand to be read more than once before they start feeling real. 3 weeks later, you're standing in an empty unit on the 34th floor in Sunny Isles Beach. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The Atlantic doing that thing it does at golden hour where it stops looking like water and starts looking almost like a held breath. The realtor, a woman named Sabrina Colthurst, doesn't rush you through it. She's shown this same unit to people who bought it within an afternoon and to people who walked out and never called again, and she's stopped trying to guess which type you'll turn out to be. $3.1 million. You stand at the window for a long stretch, not because you're weighing the decision, but because you're letting yourself absorb what it feels like to be the kind of person for whom this is simply normal. You don't buy it that day, but you notice that you could. And that realization changes something in how you carry yourself on the flight home. Here's what the money is actually doing behind the scenes. Underneath the view and the glass, using that same 4% rule that handed you $40,000 a year, at 1 million, 5 million hands you 200,000 every single year without touching the principal, without you lifting a finger. Work stops being something you have to do and starts being something you're choosing to keep doing. That's not the same thing as quitting. Most people who reach this level don't actually stop working. They just stop being scared of what happens if they do. The doors that swing open here are specific, not vague. Your advisor's firm shifts you into their private banking division. Not the standard private client tier anymore, but the level above it. The kind of relationship where whoever answers your call has a direct line to trading desks and structured deals that never get publicly advertised. There's a term for what you technically become now, one you'd never even heard before this. A lawyer named Preston Okafor uses it during a call about a real estate fund, calling you a qualified purchaser. $5 million in investments, not counting your primary residence, is the line the SEC drew back in 1996, and crossing it legally opens the door to private equity, venture funds, and off-market deals that stay closed by law to nearly everyone still standing on the other side of that number. Not a courtesy extended to you, a regulation that now includes your name within its boundaries. You buy the watch 2 months later, almost as an afterthought, on an ordinary Tuesday at an authorized dealer in Bal Harbour. A Rolex date, just 41, oyster steel paired with white gold. You don't bother checking the price twice. You don't need to. Preston mentions near the tail end of a call about the fund paperwork that several of his other clients at this level charter private flights instead of flying commercial. A Phenom 300 departing from a private terminal wheels up 20 minutes after you arrive. No lines, no gates. You laugh it off the same way you laughed off 5 million once, the same way you laughed off 1 million before that. But this time you notice you don't laugh quite as hard. That night, back in your own kitchen, the same cold coffee still sitting untouched from 3 weeks earlier, you scroll through the photos from the condo showing. The water, the light. You wait for the feeling you assumed would follow. Pride maybe, or relief, something with real weight behind it. What shows up instead is much quieter, and it takes you a minute to name it. The realization that somewhere between that grocery store parking lot and this kitchen, you stopped checking your phone just to confirm you're still you. You're about to discover that this number doesn't only open doors, it shuts a few too. The psychological toll of wealth. The text arrives from a number you haven't dialed in probably 8 years. Your cousin Dwayne Hollis, someone you used to run into at Thanksgiving before your side of the family and his stopped crossing paths much. Hey stranger, we should catch up sometime. I've got something I think you'd actually be interested in. You read the message twice, the same way you reread that 5 million email, except this time reading it again doesn't make it feel more real. It makes it feel worse. You already know what it is before you even ask, but you ask anyway, because some small part of you is hoping you're wrong. He sends over a deck, an actual slide presentation for a car detailing franchise looking to raise capital from a small group of strategic partners. You don't respond that night. You don't respond the following night either. There's a term for what's happening to you when you stumble across, almost by accident, scrolling at 1 a.m. after the third message, like Dwayne's shows up that same month. This time it's from someone you knew at your old gym in Columbus, then someone from your former apartment complex, then a name you don't even recognize who somehow got hold of your cell number. Sudden wealth syndrome. It's a documented, real pattern. The disorientation, the guilt, the creeping paranoia that sets in once people find out what you're sitting on. You always assumed that only happened to lottery winners, professional athletes, people whose money showed up overnight on the evening news, not someone like you who built it slowly, deliberately, over years. Turns out the syndrome doesn't care how you got there. It only cares about the number. The worst moment arrives at your friend's bachelor party, years later, still your friend, still leasing something new every 3 years. You're at a steakhouse in downtown Columbus, 7 guys sitting around a table, and when the check lands, there's a pause. Not a direct ask, just a pause. Everyone glancing around without quite looking like they're glancing, waiting to see if you'll be the one to grab it. You do, of course you do. But you notice that pause. You'll keep noticing it at every dinner from that point forward, and no amount of money erases the fact that you now have to wonder whether people are being genuine with you or simply being careful around you. Then there's an old friend from high school who posts something on her Instagram story weeks later. Half a joke, tagged with a laughing emoji, something along the lines of, "Must be nice not having to check price tags anymore." You weren't even there, you never posted anything yourself. Someone must have mentioned the condo or the watch or just the general shape of your life these days, and word traveled the way things travel through a hometown that feels smaller than it used to. You think about crabs stuck in a bucket, an image you read somewhere once and haven't been able to shake since. Toss a bunch of crabs into a bucket and none of them ever climb out. Not because the bucket has a lid on it, but because the moment one starts climbing, the rest reach up and pull it right back down. Nobody has to plan it out. It just happens automatically, the same way that Instagram story happened, the same way that pause at the steakhouse happened. Here's the part nobody warns you about before you cross any of these thresholds: 100,000, a million, 5 million. Every single one hands you something. Every single one also takes something from you, quietly, on a ledger nobody shows you until you're already stuck holding the bill. Total strangers respect you more than they ever used to. People who've known you for 20 years start putting distance between you, or you start putting distance between yourself and them, and it gets hard to tell which one actually happened first. You set your phone face down on the counter that night and just sit there in a kitchen overlooking nothing special, in a house that isn't the condo in Sunny Isles, wondering exactly when the number started measuring something other than dollars. You still haven't replied to Dwayne, and somewhere underneath all of it, a different question has started forming on its own. Why enough always keeps moving further away? You finally text Dwayne back on a Sunday, 3 weeks late, with a short message wishing him luck with the franchise and nothing beyond that. He never writes back. You never really expected him to. Some doors don't slam shut loudly. They just quietly stop being opened. A few nights later, you're back at your kitchen table. The same house. Nothing overlooking any ocean. Laptop open to an account you check maybe twice a year now, since checking it more often than that. Used to be its own particular brand of anxiety you're trying hard to unlearn. The number on the screen sits higher than it did the last time you looked. You wait for the feeling you assumed would show up. It doesn't come. Instead, you find yourself thinking about a conversation from a month back on a golf course outside Naples with a man named Garrett Fenimore, someone you'd met exactly twice before that day. He's somewhere north of 8 figures, though you don't know exactly how far, and you've learned by now not to ask. Around the 4th hole, almost offhandedly, he mentioned he still worries about money, though not the way you used to worry, not the overdraft fee kind of worry. A different flavor entirely. He'd just watched a friend of his worth close to $40 million get passed over for a board seat by someone worth triple that amount. It never stops, Garrett said, lining up a putt he'd already missed twice. The number you think will finally fix it is never actually the number that fixes it. You didn't fully understand him that day. You think you might understand him now. There's actual research on this, the kind you would have rolled your eyes at back in that grocery store parking lot. Surveys that keep asking people what net worth would finally make them feel secure. And the answer keeps landing at roughly double whatever the person currently has. Not just once, but every single time at every income level, from people worth $50,000 to people worth $50 million. The finish line moves at exactly the same speed you're running toward it. It was never actually a finish line to begin with. It just looked like one from far enough away. You think back to the version of yourself sitting in that car outside the grocery store doing tight chess math over $436. That version of you believed completely that one specific number would end the feeling for good, that arriving somewhere would finally let you stop moving. You've since arrived more than once at numbers that version of you couldn't have even imagined. The feeling never actually ended. It just changed shape and kept right on pace with you. Here's what you understand now that you didn't back then. None of it, not the median, not the 100,000 mark, not the qualified purchaser line at 5 million, was ever really about the number itself. The number was simply wherever the goalpost happened to be standing on any given Tuesday. The real work, the part nobody hands you in a bank letter or a call from a private banker, is deciding for yourself entirely on your own terms, before the next threshold shows up, exactly what enough is going to mean to you. And then actually having the discipline to stop there once you hit it. Not because you ran out of room to keep climbing, but because you decided the climbing itself was finished. You close the laptop. Outside, it's just an ordinary Tuesday night in Ohio. Nothing different from 1,000 other Tuesday nights you've lived through at every number along the way. The question doesn't resolve itself sitting there in your kitchen. It just sits there alongside you the same way it sat with Garrett out on that golf course, the same way it probably sits with everyone eventually, once they finally stop climbing long enough to actually ask it. What number would genuinely be enough for you? And would you even recognize it on the day you finally reached it? The finish line that keeps walking away every time you get close. You still check your balance sometimes, more from habit than actual need. The number's different every time you look. The feeling underneath it never really is. You know now that the median was never the villain and the average was never the real goal, just a story that got told the wrong way. You know the fee waivers and the private bankers never proved anything beyond a system simply doing what systems are built to do. And you know that the the pause at the bachelor party, the laughing emoji on that story. That cost was always going to come due no matter which threshold you crossed to get there. Tomorrow, you'll open your banking app again. The habit doesn't quit just because the reason behind it did. Somewhere right now, someone with double what you have is running the exact same math you used to run outside that grocery store. What number are you actually running from?